Mesa Stiletto Juice Series 2 to my right. The Mesa Stiletto, Mesa's unloved red-headed stepchild. This amp I've owned for a very long time. I'd estimate about 14, 15 years, and it had been my main amplifier for the last 4 years. Based on British circuitry, the Stiletto was designed as a contender to the Marshall or British gain market. Mesa famously being recognised for its modified Fender amplifiers and rectifier series. Then came this amp, with its striking looks, high build quality. I can only imagine the anticipation as this thing was about to come onto the market. But it would never find the success of the previous models and would find itself discontinued. The amplifier features 2 channels with various mode switches on each. Let's get into it. Sounds good. It's been a while since I've plugged this one in. I managed to scoop this one up in this awesome wine red Taurus Tolex with this cream coloured old school wicker front grille. Let's start going through some of the sounds. Alright, I've set up a couple of patches, so we're going to have the amplifier raw with no effects, so you can hear the amplifier as it is, and then I'm also going to play with my pedal board setup as I would typically use it. So we're going to get the best of both worlds here. Top switch is called Fat Clean, and this is the Fat Clean with no effects. Middle position. I think you get the idea. We'll move on. Tight clean. Bit of a volume drop there. Turn her up a bit. And the position that I would normally use, crunch. The crunch mode because it's got a little bit of breakup, a lot more clarity, a bit more of that clang sound. If we compare that again to the Fat Clean, no, it's nice, but it lacks that character. So on crunch mode on channel 1, this now extends to channel 2, and the top mode on channel 2, I'm going to set them up identically because I do believe they're almost identical. So we'll go from channel 1 to channel 2, both on crunch mode. Channel 2, channel 1. And I find this crunch mode to very, very closely resemble a JCM 800. So we're on channel 2. I'll set this how I would run a JCM 800, which is the gain on max, bass on full. Sue me if you don't like it. Roll the presence down a bit. Something to note on this amp, the presence can be quite dangerous. All right. I have a lot of experience with the JCM 800, and though it's not the pure definition of the JCM 800 sound, it does have a Mesa flavored low end and response to it, but tonally I think you get the idea. Maybe you agree, maybe you would disagree. Leave a comment if you want to fight about it or agree, but what do you think? Does it sound like a JCM 800 in to your tailored ears? So I'll go ahead and slam that with a boost. We've got a Pepper's Dirty Tree down on the board. Unboosted again. And boosted. Cool, man. Sounds good. Anyway, we'll move on now. We'll stick to channel 2, roll the gain back, and the next mode is called tight gain. This is where I spend most of my time with it. And this is just, I guess, adding more structure to the gain, like a gain stage, more preamp distortion within the amp. So that's unboosted. And we'll boost that now. And the last mode continues from there. So this is more 5150 style high gain. We'll give you the amplifier unboosted. Quick run through again. Crunch, tight gain, fluid gain. And now we'll boost that. Cool. Now I'm going to just noodle around with it. We'll see what comes out of my brain and mouth as we go. So this is just my first clean setting. going to stick with tight gain. The amp inherently does not have a lot of low end in it, so I've got the bass pushed to 10. I like a lot of low end, but personally I would have liked to have seen like a resonance or depth knob on this, or just more low end inherent in the amp. So it's one of the flaws of this amp. I mean, the forums go wild about what garbage this amp is. I know it's not well respected. It's got its niche and its fans, me being one of them. Having used it for so long, I'm pretty used to it and what it can do. I'll go through some of the knobs now, see what they do. I'll show you. The presence on this thing is wild. You got to be pretty careful with it. So if you ever get your hands on it, start with the presence really low. I mean, just start with the presence off. Dial in your sound and then start bringing presence into it, because it's very spiky and very harsh. So roll that presence off. Turn it up a bit. 9 o'clock. I think you get the idea. It's already too much there. So what I noticed, my own behavior with this amp, is I was always fiddling with this. Like, some days I like it here, some days I like it there. And as a rule with an amplifier, I had to learn that if you're always reaching for the dials, well, maybe it's not the right amp. You want an amp that you can turn on and just start using without perpetually messing around with it. Let's do the scooped metal thing. I reckon you can get that wild mid-90s Sepultura sound by scooping the mids, boosting the treble. Check this out. Sorry, I don't know any Sepultura riffs. I should. What's one of them riffs? Help me. Something like that. Yeah, what's the rule with the copyright issue? How long am I allowed to play someone else's riff before YouTube goes, "Oi, buddy, stop playing that person's riff"? Anyway, very mid-heavy amplifier. Let's dial that treble back, the presence back. So the mids are now at 0, but let's see what happens when we dial mids into the sound. Lots of mids. The amplifier has a beautiful effects loop. Never had an issue. Everything that goes through it, so long as the cables and the pedal itself is high quality, there's no problem. The loop itself, I think, is designed well. And there's a couple of things. Bold and spongy. It kind of changes the feel. And I've had this amp on all its settings and tried everything, the rectifier tubes and the silicon diodes. So, as most of you probably do, again, it probably depends what you're doing. You're going to stick with the silicon diodes, and I'm on bold mode. And again, this amp, sometimes my mind or my mood changes and I'll flick to spongy mode. Bold. I mean, it feels a little different. When it's on bold, it's a bit more stiff feeling. You got to be more aggressive with the guitar to get the signal. And on Spongy, it's I wouldn't actually call it spongy, but it just becomes a little more relaxed. But then it loses that abrasive clank. Spongy. But of course, if you're playing with a band, playing in, using it to record, once a song is mixed, or the situation, you mix a bass, drums, another guitarist, things like that, they become negligible. They don't really matter too much, but they're cool features. If you like flicking switches and messing around with, minute differences, it's there. I'll pick up a Strat now in just regular drop D. Back with the Strat. This is one of my favorite combinations. The single coils with the crunch channel with some light drive on it. Straight to the neck. Same thing, neck going down on the drive channel. Righto, so those were some sound samples, so you can hear all the different pickups with the Strat. It really loves this amp. So what I noticed about this amp is it's very dynamic, as in it's very good at listening to what's coming into it. So it's, every guitar has its own thing, You might have active humbuckers like I did in my Les Paul, and now I have passive single coils and a hot rodded, JB type pickup in the bridge. But if you compare those, the way this sounds compared to that guitar, the tones, I find the tones quite radically different. So we'll play through again, various combinations with various of the typical sounds that I'd normally use on the pedal board. This is one of my favorite sounds, the combination of the bridge in the middle position. It's a tone that it doesn't come out of every guitar. It's It's a tone that can only come from this combination in a Strat. In my opinion, crucify me if you must. I think that'll do it. What do you think? Is this an amplifier you're considering on the used market? I got to be honest, it's a interesting amp to get used to. I think it shines in the clean channel and the low gain crunch sounds, absolutely. And the heavy tones, they're completely doable. But what I find is, like an old Marshall, this thing needs the power amp to really be booted. So I didn't mention earlier, but this is rigged up to a two notes Torpedo Captor X, which is absorbing quite a lot of real world volume. So when this amp's turned down, bedroom volume type stuff, it does have this weird placed midsection, and it's not always fun playing heavy metal, like the big palm muted chugging riffs. So of course it depends what you're trying to do. I wouldn't specifically recommend this as a only metal guy amp, although that being said, in a two guitar situation where one might be using a rectifier, something a bit darker with a big fat bottom end filling out a lot of space and girth, this might be the perfect amp for the other guitarist, the more shreddy lead guy who takes on a more melodic role in a band, where the tone of this amp really cuts through. Like, I've gigged with this amp, and again, when you're in a gigging situation or in a rehearsal room and you're allowed to turn that power amp up, it is awesome for that heavy metal stuff. But just keep in mind that if you're only going to be using it at low volumes, or you don't have a load box or something where you can push a lot of the power amp into the chain, it can be a bit of an abrasive thing. You'll read lots of stuff like that on the forums, on the interwebs, people talking about it's shrill and it's thin and all that stuff, and I do agree it is a difficult amp to deal with, which is probably why Mesa chose to discontinue it, because at the end of the day, the audience, the market base, I've seen, the Mastodon documentary, Bill Callagher is using one of these to record Blood Mountain, but it's hard to tell with those guys anyway. They like switch amps every year. They change endorsements all the time, and that's all well and good. So maybe that's relevant to whether he's stuck with this amp or why he continued to move on. But generally, no one has seemed to stick with this amp full time, whereas you'll find rectifiers everywhere still to this day. It's tailored to the British circuit, so it's like a Marshall copy, hot-rodded Marshall thing. Nothing to be ashamed of. Every amp brand copies designs and whatnot. But this thing should have been the love child or the culmination of the dual rectifier and the JCM 800. Bring all the good things, all that sweet tone of the JCM 800, but reinforce it with that massive thumping low end. And at least if that low end was on tap, you could do anything you want with this amp, but the low end is just not there in many situations. So that's my opinion of what they probably ought to have done with this amp, but it is not that. It's its own thing. It has its place on the market. It's not widely respected, therefore they don't hold their value. So if you're after a wicked quality build Mesa amp that looks great and does sound good, they're a pretty good buy, I think. But again, you got to weigh it up, and realistically, you got to be careful. All these demos you see people playing on the internet, on YouTube, you're seeking out something you're potentially going to purchase. You need to have your own gear, your own guitar, your own hands, your own pick choice, whatever you use. All these things you have to understand fundamentally to get a good grasp of what works for you. So I bought this amp blindly on eBay, never played one, never even seen one in person, but I knew it was around. I saw it, the way it looks, for the most part, to be honest, and I bought it. Had it shipped from the States to Australia. The transformers are changed because Mesa don't have a switch, so you have to change the entire transformer. That's been done, and yeah, I've just persisted with it for a long time. What do you think? I'll wrap the video up. Any questions, comments, general chit chat about the amplifier, or if you want to criticize me and rain hate down on my life and try and make me feel terrible, I also welcome that too. Find your way to the bottom, hit the like and subscribe button. This is My Life for Aya. Peace.